Hey, welcome to the Go-To Physio podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan, and in season 4, it's all about building a go-to clinic that gives you happy patients, happy staff, high profits, and the freedom as a proud go-to clinic owner. My aim is to share my mistakes and my successes over the last 15 years working in professional sport and private practice, and ultimately building a go-to clinic that's given me the freedom to travel all around the world. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to the Go-To Physio podcast again, and season 4 is all about building a go-to clinic that gives you happy patients, high profits, happy staff, and freedom as a proud go-to clinic owner in your community. And as always, I'm joined by head business coach in the Go-To Clinic Mastermind program, Paddy Mulligan. Thank you for joining me again, Paddy.
Cheers, Dave. Today we're going to chat about culture, which I'm really passionate about. I love it. Absolutely love chatting about culture and trying to create a good culture in our clinics.
Yeah, and the one thing that I was really keen to have you on board, Paddy, is obviously you own 4 different clinics in Ireland. Is it 4? Have you got any more?
Yeah. No. We have 4. We have 3 main sites. We have 4 different clinics within that.
Yeah.
I won't say anymore. There are other discussions going on, but
Right. No doubt. I can't keep up.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'll say this on our weekly calls, why I think we work well together is obviously I've got a solo clinic, growing that, definitely looking to acquire more clinics and start clinics in the next years now that we've got this place sorted. But you've got different skills to me, and I think you do some of these things really well. And I think we probably go about it slightly different in terms of culture. And I don't think there's any right or wrong. So I think you do some stuff really well, and I'll always admit on the calls that you do them things really well. I need to improve some stuff that I see you do really well. This will be a really good call in terms of, and why this is important is because this is the stuff that's going to help you attract the A players. Okay, again, that's a bit of an A player is a bit of a buzzword, okay? But we want to really break that down today, because we want to create a clinic culture that attracts and retains top therapists, okay? Top therapists, go-to therapists, build go-to clinics, okay? What is a go-to therapist? What is an A player therapist? It's a therapist that can take a patient in, they can get buy-in, they can confidently explain the problem, solution, and plan. They can keep that patient progressing even when the pain eases, and they can exceed their expectations. They can get the results that generate reviews, referrals, and retain these people in the future. Okay, that to me is my definition of a go-to therapist.
Yeah.
And we want to attract these people. Now, the caveat here, and I'm going to say this right off the bat, and I'm probably going to upset a few people, attracting therapists, just because a therapist has 10 years experience does not mean that they're going to thrive in private practice. We've had this with therapists that we coach. They had 1 or 2 therapists apply, go for the most therapist, and they're the worst patient visit average. They're stuck in their ways, they've got bad habits. Private practice is a high pressure environment, so we need to attract the right people. It all goes back to numbers, people, and systems. Okay, now I've started with a little bit of a rant, so I apologize about that. So with that said, I'm gonna damage a little bit here, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Paddy. So let's talk a little bit around creating the culture that attracts and retains these therapists. What are the fundamentals that need to be in place?
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in how slick, obviously, your definition of that go-to therapist is, and obviously you've built that. And for me, I think I've just jotting down here kind of 3 words is if I'm looking for an A player or a go-to therapist, it's what you describe, but also someone who has the potential or the ability to perform, as you talked about, in a pressurized environment or with some standards. Someone that I can trust, someone that I know is a representation of me in the business, and if I'm not there, that I know they'll be a good representation, and I can trust them from the how they interact with people to the funds to whatever it might be. I think that's really important. And the other piece for me I look at is someone who's accountable. So someone who's accountable as regards, you asked me to do that, I will follow through on that. They're just kind of 3 of the things that I kind of look for.
Sorry, Paddy, I'm just going to cut you in there. Just hold your thought there, because I know there's something good coming here. I can feel it. But what Paddy's talking about there, okay, just to bring this into the real world, is core values, okay? First and foremost, even without the culture, okay, we have to hire on core values first and foremost. We have to get the right person first. The clinical skills, I can train the clinical skills. I can transform a therapist without being cocky in 90 days. Okay. The clinical skills in private practice, the go-to therapist mentorship, it's done it over 1,000 people. It's proven beyond doubt at this stage. The clinical system is not hard to train. It's the person to apply the system is the hardest bit to get. And that's why what Paddy's alluding to there is we have to hire people first. Okay. You have to get the right person, and we have to hire in private practice therapists with good people skills. It doesn't matter if they're the greatest clinician and they're the best manual therapist. If they've got poor people skills, it's going to be very hard to get patients to buy in and trust you and follow through. Okay. So people skills first and foremost when we're attracting therapists. Sorry, Paddy, I just thought that was really important.
No, and you're
You,
right.
you, you were saying it in a roundabout way.
That's what we're touching on it with core values, and it's front and center. So if we're looking to attract therapists, the things that go on our job advert or job spec, whatever you want to call it, it's about our vision and where we're going, and it's about our values. And that's the information that we disseminate and radiate, or whatever phrase you want to use, to push out there. Because in essence, when people do their due diligence and do their research on the website, or ask their friends, or look at our socials, is that information being put out there? Because everything, it's information so easily accessible nowadays. People do their due diligence, do the research. Well, the right kind of people do their due diligence and research. So do we have a clear vision of where we're going and what we want? And is that going to excite that person who's going to come on board? Yeah. And then what are our values? Are they clearly defined? And what are the values of you as a solo clinician, or you as a clinic owner, that are vital and fundamental to the business that you're creating or want to create? And by having them and communicating them, you will attract the right kind of people. And it'll be pretty obvious if the values don't align. And it can be weeded out in the interview process, or if someone does manage to get through, it's very apparent very quickly when they come into your world, because we can hire and fire via the values. A mismatch in values is one of the biggest challenges that you're going to face, because you talked about we can train them clinically, we can give them some of the soft skills to a certain extent, but if the values don't align, I've very, very, very rarely seen it work. Really rarely seen it work.
Absolutely. And sorry, I was just getting something up there because I wanted to get the right words for it. And you've actually touched on 3 out of the 6. Okay, so again, this is the company culture framework. I want to give shout out to Kevin, who was one of my business coaches that I worked with quite a few years back, and he came up with this, and he put 6 components to culture. Okay, so the 6 components to culture, and Paddy, if you remember, I want you to think about now, and I'm coaching you, which of the 6 did Paddy mention? So the first one is company vision, the second one is company values, the third one is beliefs, the fourth one is communication, the fifth one is accountability, and then the sixth one is reward, recognition, and appreciation. Okay, so that was his 6 kind of key things that made up a culture. Okay, so if we bring that back, Paddy, you definitely mentioned vision. Vision's really important, having a clear vision. Core values, we've talked about that. You mentioned accountability as well there. Okay. So I think that's really important to understand, is everything that we've talked about in the first few episodes. It might be airy-fairy at the start for the first time of hearing this stuff, but these are tools that you're going to use again and again and again. Louise there, we offered her the job. First thing we gave her is the vision. Here's where we're going. Do you want to be part of it? Okay. First thing that Louise done on yesterday when she onboarded, Shane spent an hour with her induction. The first thing he talks about, company vision. The second thing he talks about is the company core values, the standards we expect. First 2 things in the first hour, we've got a presentation on that. Okay. Yep. And everything that we were doing in the interview process was finding the core values that aligned with the person. Okay, so if you do a good job at that, then you take it into that, it should be a lot more plain sailing. Now, the belief side of it, and this is the bit I think you do really well, Paddy, is your personal beliefs as a clinic owner. I think that's the standard, the leadership that you said, I think is really important as well.
Yeah. But look, I think it's fundamental, but actually just on the core values piece, it's one of our initial screening tools, is that core value based question. So when somebody applies, we send them back 3 questions, and 2 of the 3 are based around core values. So you sometimes get these token answers, and now we're getting the kind of chat GPT generated answers. But you see threads of, sadly, yes, you see threads of growth and learning, one of our kind of values, fundamental values. And you see threads of people where you go, there's a spark here, there's an energy, there's something that I would be potentially be energized by being around this person. I can see there's a thread, they can move on to the next stage. So I think that's really important if we're going to attract the right people. And the other piece on this, Dave, is that there's a concern at the moment because are we likely to get an abundance of applicants? Some clinics, yes, most clinics, no. So we're fearful of putting up barriers. So we're fearful of putting up steps or putting in place steps that will slow down the process. And sometimes you might make a strategic decision just to hire someone reasonably quickly. But as we touched on last episode, hire slow and fire fast. But actually, the really good A players absolutely respect that you slow down the process, that you take the time, that you get to know them, that they truly understand what they're stepping into. That seems to, for us, attract some really, really strong people. So that's one of the things from an attraction point of view. And the other piece that we try and put is a really open book. So part of our process is part of our interview process. They come into the clinic. They can spend half a day or a day in the clinic, be it in reception or shadow us before they sign a contract. They have to do that. So they actually get to experience and see. And sometimes we're a bit too closed. We know what happens in our clinic. We know how great it is, but these people don't know. Do you know? And if they have 4 or 5 different clinics lining up and they're being offered X, Y, Z, if we send them our vision, if we're clear on our values and it aligns with them, and we show them how our world is and they get to meet our people and they build a bond and they say, okay, I can see myself here. It's for us has differentiated us from other clinics and our most recent hires where there's one clinician who came on board recently, I think had 5 different job offers compared to ours, and we offered a lower rate. She wanted to be part of what we're building and the community and the opportunity to grow and learn. And I think from a clinical point of view and from a mentorship and a training point of view, one of the biggest things that attracts clinicians, good quality clinicians, is the opportunity to be involved in the mentorship and the training. Because obviously that's fundamental to what we offer, is the ability to take part and be involved in that. And it's a huge differentiator because the really good ones, the 1-2 year qualified go-getters, generalization using their go, God, I can take part in this and I'll be upskilled and you'll train me in this and it's part of the system that you use, and it often differentiates. So that's one of the things that we use to attract those people who are keen to evolve clinically.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that kind of ties into the second half of our title as well, which is attracting and retaining therapists, because I think we've certainly seen, not necessarily, I think, in our program, because I think it's been drilled into them at this stage, and obviously our clinic owners have access to the therapist mentorship for their staff, but we've seen a lot of pain points, and I think we were chatting about it where therapists have been sold this vision by clinic owners of mentorship, of CPD and all this, and then when they get into the clinic, they're just left to their own devices, probably because of all the other problems that the clinic owner, through no fault of their own, well, obviously they have to take responsibility, but they're busy, they don't have time then, and then before you know it, a good therapist leaves. So the retention of that therapist is really important. And I think that when we look at the company culture, I think the reward, recognition, appreciation bit probably ties into that. And we look at it slightly different in the mastermind, and especially the head physio systems. One of the first things we need to understand is what's the human needs of our therapists. What does that therapist need? Some therapists are really motivated and driven by financials and stats. They need to know numbers. Okay. Other therapists, one of their main human needs is contribution. They just want to help patients. They want to do the best for the patient. So talking to those two therapists, you need to communicate, which again is culture, one of the 6 of culture. We need to communicate to those therapists slightly differently as well. Okay. So I think that's a really important part, as well as understanding what your therapist values. And then can we actually go and deliver it? Because if we can talk the talk, but once they get in, you're not going to retain them then. And then it's back to square one.
I think the bit I'm starting to, we talked about the changing your identity as I go from a clinic-ish clinician to a clinic owner to a CEO or whatever title I'm going to give myself, is what's the thing that gives you energy? And the bit that gives me energy now is developing people. And that's definitely something I've got better and I've got from you, is that the human needs and the understanding that the majority of people in my world want to contribute. And the thing that we need to understand is, if we're going to retain people, we need to not offer false promises. So if we say we're going to offer them the training, get them on the program, allocate the time, and help the people evolve. Because if they stay with you 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, what I always say is, when you're part of our world, I will do everything. I just want you to contribute to the process. But you will leave our world, if you do ever leave, hopefully not, better condition and a better person. And that's the key bit. So making sure that you allocate time to the training, but also understand that these are people. And as much as we are putting ourselves out there and we have fears and we've got stresses, they also have stuff going on. So if we can allocate that one-to-one time, be it a 40 minutes a month or once a week where you do your clinical stuff, but you need to have that also, that balance of, how are you? Sometimes it might be a clinical conversation that you're starting, but you just get a sense of, the numbers are off track. I can go after people here with the numbers, or I can just open up and say, how are you? How are things? Is there anything I need to know? And I think there's 3 threads, I was just jotting down here, that when I do my quarterly reviews with each team member, I look at the professional development piece, which is the clinical, say that the mentorship and then training. The personal piece, so how are they getting on personally? So is there anything that we can help with? And then I call it the performance side of it. So most of the guys are sporty. Is there anything they want to do? Is there any like high rocks they want to train for? Could we set up that a few of us do it together? So it's looking at developing the person, not just from a clinical point of view, but from a personal and performance point of view. And that in essence creates people who feel valued and want to stay part of your world. Now, it's not all that straightforward, but it's not, I've got a great person in there in the room and see that the more I do this, the more I understand, especially with multi-sites, when my contact time becomes less and less and less. And you're brilliant at this, Dave, is the high value quality inputs that they leave going, I feel clear, I feel better for that 30-40 minute input that I gave them. It might only be once a month, rather than 3 or 4 hours every day of just not actually getting to a root source of a problem and helping them to evolve. So I hope that's come across clear. But I think for me, that's something I'm passionate about. And if we want to retain people, it's thinking about them as a whole person, not just the clinician piece.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's always the big challenge, because especially with my senior leadership team, like I'll be completely honest, and like Shane, my number 2 gets it off me in the nicest possible way a lot, but it's also then understanding when I need to pick him back up again.
Yeah.
And he knows that I do it from a place of trying to push him on to make him better. And I think that's the big thing that I try to do with all my therapists, is the intensity that I bring, or that I want to be in those in-service trainings. No, we're not sitting down having a cup of coffee. This is what we're doing in this in-service training. Show me, don't tell me. And it aligns to the culture again of the vision, why we're doing this. Every one of my therapists know why I'm pushing them, because our vision is the best sports injury clinic in the country. In order to get to that, we need to be at that standard. I'm going to push you all and drag you all up with me, okay, and hopefully lead. And again, that's a lot of the stuff I've seen. I've worked with really successful professional organizations and not so professional. And again, the leadership there, you said it there, what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop leaders. And the best sports teams in the world, they don't have one leader, they've got leaders throughout the team essentially. So I think it's getting that balance. I thanks for the compliment, but I wouldn't say I'm it's something I'm constantly working on. But the other thing that I want to bring it back here, Paddy, that I think is really important then is, so we've talked a lot about the company vision, the values, your beliefs, and how you lead the team as well, and what's tolerated. Okay. And a lot of the beliefs, and again, I want to give Kevin credit for this as well. There's a lot of stuff that's unsaid or unwritten that happens in your clinic. And staff know that that's tolerable or that's not tolerable. Okay. And a lot of that comes down to you as a clinic leader, okay, and how you perform. Because what you can't do is you can't tell your staff to do this, this, and this, and then you do the complete opposite. Everything that I ask my staff to do, they need to know that I'm willing to do it myself, or I have done it myself. And I think that's really important as well in terms of creating a culture, because if you're telling your staff to do this, this, and this, and they say you sack it off, then that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything to add on that one, Paddy? Because there's
Yeah.
one big one I want to talk about in
Yeah.
terms of this as well.
I think we can always harp on about in the healthcare industry how it can be difficult. But I actually think one of the real positive things of our businesses is that invariably we should have done the task. So as we ascend through the business, we will have been the clinician, we will have done the admin, we will have set up the marketing stuff, we will have done the steps. So we actually truly get it and understand it. And we set the standards, so we set the expectations of what, and we understand what dipping below that is. And I think it's really important that, as you say, we need to make sure that if we say we're going to do something, we follow through on it, and they understand what the level of expectation is. Because often what we see is we'll call it weak leadership. You can be nice leader, but firm, and the team know if you're not hitting your standards, you'll be brought back in. But often when we look at problems in the business, it can be weak leadership of you come up with an idea, you kind of fluff it and say, oh, I want you to do this, but there's no clear definition of success. So that clear definition of success and expectation within a role, and the good people, and the bit that's mind-blowing for me that's starting to happen is as you put in place a leadership team and you challenge them and you coach them, is with the right people, they'll actually come up with ideas and they'll actually solve problems for you. And you're thinking, Jesus, I don't have to come up with all the answers, because that is very tiring and difficult to do. And that's probably for the multi-clinic owners, but from a solo clinician point of view, is you will invariably have done the role, so you can set the expectations. And as we talked about the onboarding, set it from the start so they understand what success is.
Yeah. And I think that's really important in terms of, we talked a lot about definition of success in a previous episode for a clinic owner.
Mm.
In terms of culture and creating, attracting and retaining therapists, you have to understand what's the definition of success for your therapist, which goes back to the human needs piece. And then we need to create the environment to get the best out of our staff. Your job as a clinic owner, turn your assets, which is your staff, into revenue. So we have to get the best out of our staff. So I think that's a really important piece. And I think that probably leads me nicely into the final piece that we haven't talked about. So we've talked a lot about vision, values, us and our beliefs, and the unspoken beliefs of the business, which a lot of it's being driven from us. Communication, okay? Accountability, we haven't spoke a lot about yet. And then the reward, recognition, appreciation bits, more the human needs and the definition of success for the therapist. So I just want to come back to the second last one, which is accountability. And I see a lot of therapists, they hate key performance indicators. They hate stats because they feel like it's been driven into them in a threatening way. And also then, and I'll tell you this from working with a lot of clinic owners and mentorship therapists, if you drive that into therapists, the first thing that they think is it just feels too salesy. And that's a problem, especially for the clinician with a human need of contribution. A clinician who's growth minded and financially driven, they're going to love those stats, okay? But a clinician whose contribution just wants to do the best for the patient, there's going to be an inner conflict there straight away. So driving those KPIs home in a way that's creating fear and threatening, very often that's going to be a big impact in your ability to retain top therapists. And certainly when I started out with all of these numbers and even packages, because I didn't understand it properly at the time and how we were positioning it and using scripts and all of that, staff just felt salesy. And then ultimately they feel uncomfortable. That ties in then they're not achieving their definition of success, which is a big thing then as to why you don't retain them. Is there anything to add on that, Paddy?
No, I think we can talk about understanding the why behind it. So if we sit down with someone and say, this number's this, that's not good enough, this number's this, it's understanding the why. And if it's someone who wants to contribute, it's picking apart and saying, your IA rebook rate is 60%, for example. I'm just going to use this as an example. The second order consequence of this is obviously your overall patient numbers are down. But what we're finding is there are some patients who we're not helping them to get to the root source of their problem, and we're not helping them to get to the outcome that they want. So in essence, we're failing them. So we're going to put in place a structure whereby we're going to get you to review the modules, these modules, in the trauma clinician material. You're going to watch them, and next Tuesday we're going to run through this material. And they'll feel like, okay, actually now that I can see what you mean by that, and you give a couple examples of maybe patients who've dropped off. I may have handled it differently, but I'm going to help you to bridge the gap now. and give you some skills. So that kind of excites them. It turns it from, okay, I'm aware I'm not hitting the standard, but there's actually a pathway here now for me to improve. Now, if that is a continuous loop and there's no change, obviously there's an issue there. But often what people need is the issue to be highlighted, a support or a plan and a structure put in place, some accountability towards achieving it. And invariably what you'll see then is the intent, and more often than not, some progress and success with that. Now, it's not always straightforward or linear, but we all need a plan, we all need accountability. And sometimes this stuff, it takes a while for it to get ingrained in our mind, and often with clinicians, it takes a while for that. And if they understand the why behind it, we explain it in a sequential way, it's more likely that we'll get better outcome.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And again, just to bring it maybe a bit more high level again,
Yeah.
it's changing the narrative from the language of high performers is numbers. We need numbers, but it's changing that narrative as we're using these numbers against you to we're actually flipping it on its head and going, we're using these numbers to support you, to help you achieve your definition of success so that you can feel confident and feel like you're winning every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think that then ties in, and this is where all of this loop comes together, to your core values. There has to be that trust there from the therapist to be vulnerable as well. Okay. And there needs to be the trust there that you're actually helping the therapist succeed, so that they don't just think he doesn't care, he just wants to make loads of money. Okay. So I think that accountability piece, certainly I've got that wrong when I first started putting scripts in the clinic 10 years ago or whatever it was, and trying to sell packages with scripts. Number one, the admin and the therapist, they just sound like robots. It sounds salesy. Your percentages aren't worth it anyways, and then staff are unhappy. Whereas if you get the root source of the problem, an IA, if the therapist knows what they need to do, that's where the selling happens. And then when the patient comes out, you just position it. If you want to save some money, here's the things. Therapists are happy, admin's happy, person's happy, and you're going to find your conversion rates are a lot higher. So addressing the root problem there, which is the clinical skills of the therapist, helps them succeed. And I think the big thing there that probably goes underappreciated, or maybe you didn't emphasize it there, Paddy, just so the listener picks it up on.
Yeah.
What you've done there by that example is you've helped that therapist improve and be successful. And the loyalty, the bond, the connection, that are all part of culture as well. Okay. Do not underestimate that. If you help somebody solve a problem and be successful and get a win, as I said, like we've a WhatsApp group, world-class therapists, and we'll discuss our most challenging cases, anyone who's off track in the in-service trainings. And again, it's all generated based on our stats. And then usually you'll help the therapist clinically reason, problem solve. I won't tell the therapist the answer. I'll coach the therapist to get the answers out of them. Okay. Unless I literally at the end of that, I have to do it. Okay. But then you get the text that night when the therapist has seen the patient, and the energy and the enthusiasm and the buzz of this worked, and the patient's now paying free for the first time, doing this movement in 6 years, and you can feel the energy, and that then reinforces the culture of winning again. And that, to most therapists, that's what they want. They don't want, more and more money, or like, obviously it's important, but the most important thing for the vast majority of therapists in your clinic is the buzz of actually helping people progress. And if we can help them be successful and they have that coaching environment and support as well, then that's going to go a big way to retaining these therapists as well.
I'd actually jot down something similar, because one of the things that we would do is something similar, whereby if a therapist they're struggling at that, often, for me as a clinician, I know I still would get a buzz from when someone achieves their outcome, and you just have that thing of, fuck, delighted for you, I'm really fucking happy for you. Whereas how I explain it to the therapist, if someone's dropping off, we're not getting them to, like, we had a situation there a few weeks ago where the team won a big final, and the player who was the captain was injured, worked really closely with our therapist, and they gave the therapist a shout out when they were doing the trophy. And the buzz the therapist got from achieving that, and I was like, there you go. If you had just said to them, come back in 2 weeks, see how you go, you wouldn't have gotten them to that point. Whereas you follow the process, you worked with them, you did above and beyond, and that's that visceral reward that people crave, and the energy that therapist has now is huge. So that's the kind of stuff that we can relay to that team member if that's something that makes them tick.
Outstanding. Cool. So we've spent a lot of the second half of this episode more on the
Yeah.
retention side of it, obviously. Okay. But to bring it all together again today, if you want to attract top therapists, go-to therapists, first of all, I'm going to say it's all about getting the right person. Okay. So people, number, systems. Okay. It's all about, in this scenario, it's getting the right person. Okay. Find the right person. That should align with your vision, your core values piece. Then we also have the beliefs, the communication piece. We've got the accountability piece and the human needs piece also. Okay. So we attract the right person. We've got the proper systems to onboard a therapist. We've got the proper structures in place in the clinic to help support a therapist for them to achieve their definition of success. Okay. Then first and foremost, they're a person, like you said. I think that's a great point, Paddy. The people piece, the performance piece, and the clinical piece. Okay. And then the most important thing probably that I've realized as well then is we really need to double down then on the vision. That therapist, if you want to retain that therapist, if you've got a great go-to therapist, the clinic needs to continue to grow and they need to see their vision within the vision for the clinic. Okay. And if you can get that, capture that, that's going to go a long way as well.
Yeah. I think it's all about keeping energy. So I describe it as the clinic and grows and the vision may evolve or you're moving towards it, you're positioning the next challenge or the next exciting thing in front of the clinicians so they can see themselves growing into it. And that's the key bit. And the other thing, Dave, is to remember as well is that something we pride ourselves is every quarter we do something fun. So like we did bog jumping, we've done canoeing down the River Boyne, we've done sheep herding, we've done all sorts of stuff. And it can be a session or it can be just an activity where you get a group of people together and they just relax and enjoy themselves. And again, they knock on energy. It's like we'll call it team bonding. Or now, because we've got so big, we did to hell and back, which is the running thing. And we're now called a corporate something event. And I was like, we're just having a bit of crack. But now because we've got so big, it's called a corporate event. But it's the other piece of the retention. So building relationships so that people will want to stay in your world as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I'm alluding to. I think you do that stuff really well. It's something I don't do well enough. And it's something that I think definitely now within this building and stuff, we've probably got more opportunities because everyone's in the one place again to probably further enhance the culture and the reputation. But I think you do an outstanding job of all of that stuff. And I think that's something I'm definitely aspiring to get to that level. I am taking notice of that. So you are very, very good at that. So, right, I think that's a great part to wrap up with, Paddy. Thank you for your insights there.
Cheers, Dave.
I think we've covered a lot there. And again, when we talk about attracting and we talk about retaining therapists, I'm sure there's a lot there that therapists have overlooked. And as I said, I've made a lot of mistakes and I wasn't aware of all of these things. And it's cost a lot of money in coaching and mistakes and losing good staff and various other bits and maybe attracting the wrong staff and having to get rid of those. So hopefully this episode will give people something to think about so that we can save them a few mistakes along the way and make their lives a little bit easier on their way to building that go-to clinic. All right, so thank you very much, Paddy. We'll see you on the next episode. As always, feel free to reach out any questions, any topics you want us to cover. Love to hear, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like a free copy of my Head Physio Systems 6-step checklist that I use to personally audit my own therapists to make sure that they can keep patients progressing even when the pain is eased so that we can ethically increase our patient numbers, our revenues and referrals, head over to www.thegotophysio.com/checklist and I'll get that sent straight over to you. That's it for this week. I'll see you in next week's show.